question then. We'll start with you, Mr. Arcuri.
Thank you.
Agriculture, in my mind, is a nonpartisan issue. How will your experience and leadership keep the 24th District's most important industry strong and viable for the future?
Thank you. One of the things that I have done after talking to dairy farmers time and time again is I introduced a piece of legislation that would transfer the cost of shipping the milk from the dairy farmers to the processors. So what that means is right now a dairy farmer produces the milk, then has to pay the cost of putting it in a truck and then shipping it to the processor. That could be as much as what they call $1 to $1.50 per hundredweight. That's a huge amount of money for dairy farmers. My bill would shift that expense to the processors, and I think that would save dairy farmers an enormous amount of money. Additionally, I'm supportive of a bill that would approach management of the amount of production management. We need to get that in the 2012 Farm Bill, and what that would require is say that we need to set ceilings on how much milk that farmers could supply, and that way the cost, the value of the milk that they were to get would be higher. Think about this for 1 minute. What farmers get for their milk is exactly what they were getting 30 years ago. However, the cost of fuel, fertilizer, and feed has dramatically risen. We need to do everything we can to help dairy farmers get ahead, and that's why I've worked so closely with them on this issue. It's critically important to our area, especially with a company like Chobani that's making yogurt and doing extremely well down in Shenango County.
Mr. Hanna, your answer?
The impact of agriculture on this district cannot be underestimated. It's close to $700 million a year, about 80% of our economy. My goal would be to be able to be on the Agricultural Committee and participate in the 2012 Agricultural Bill. I think that we need better price discovery to eliminate manipulation. We need daily discovery, just like they do in other markets for other commodities. We don't have that in dairy. It's every couple of weeks. Now it's a week. I think it should be daily. I think that we should find ways to support our family farms. And it's not just about economics. It's about a way of life and us producing our own food in this country, which we need to do. I was brought up on, spent my best summers of my life on Shells Bush Road in Herkimer, New York, on a dairy farm, which isn't, my grandmother's family still has it, our family, but it's failed, like so many others around this district. We need to do everything we possibly do to support our farming industry and help them perhaps get into alternative things to produce also. But I think that Mr. Arcuri and I both agree that that's an asset that can't be helped enough.
Do you have a response to that, sir?
No.
Okay. Third question, we're going to start with Mr. Hanna. This writer put down, politics as usual has gotten us into this economic mess. What will you do to change the dynamic in Washington to get things done?
What we see in Washington, whoever wrote that, I agree with you. It's like watching two parties at war with themselves and we're caught in the middle. I'm a guy who said many times that I don't agree with the Democrats or the Republicans. The Democrats want larger and more expensive programs, and the Republican Party wants to cut taxes incessantly. But the one component that's missing, and to get back to the Bush tax cuts, is nobody ever talks about cutting the spending. Our deficits are a function of our spending disease. Nobody mentions that, but that's true. It's easy to borrow money from the Chinese, but we're not that far away from looking like Greece in this country. We're just larger, that's all, and maybe it'll happen later. If we don't stand up and act like adults and cut the spending in this country and start to work in a bipartisan manner to do that, all bets are off. Neither party will be relevant anymore. And if the Republican Party wins back the House this time, and I have no idea if they will or they won't, if they don't do something with that in terms of health care and cutting back on expenses and not just tax cuts, they will marginalize themselves again. So I think that I bring to the table a truly independent, thoughtful, and deliberate voice for those kinds of changes that make us feel like we have a participatory government again. We don't have that today. What we have is these two blocks of power that seem to be all about themselves. And I object to that. And I object to it in my own party, and I object to it in every party, frankly.
Okay. Mr. Arcuri, your answer?
Thank you. Well, that is obviously the objective, but when I hear Richard say those things, and I think he's very sincere, but then I listen to some of his speeches criticizing the Democrats and criticizing, the president and Nancy Pelosi, and I think that that's exactly the kind of problem that we have. Everyone is always pointing the finger and criticizing and not looking for ways to reach across the aisle. Let me tell you about one of the things that I have done. Recently, I'm on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and recently we did a bill. We also oversee the Economic Development Agency, and we did the Economic Reauthorization Bill. And I put in an amendment, I offered an amendment that would allow the EDA money that is being used for localities to also be applied for by localities that want to study consolidation. We know how important consolidation is. Federal government shouldn't mandate it, but if localities want to study it, the federal government should help by furnishing money. Mario Diaz-Balart, who was the ranking member on the other side, said, I object to it, but Mike, will you be willing to discuss it? And I said, yeah, I think we can work on it. He said, let's work on it together. I know we can work on it together, and I think we can make it work. Will you be willing to do that? And I said, yes. And that amendment passed and is now part of the EDA bill that will be taken up by the entire Congress. That's the kind of reaching across the aisle and the personal relationships that I have brought to Congress, and that's what I think we need more of.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hanna, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, I do. I take great exception to that. I do not make a point of talking badly about President Obama or Nancy Pelosi. It's not in my repertoire. I know it's in some of the ads that are thrown by the 527s, and I know about his alignment with Nancy Pelosi there. But that's not necessarily a criticism. That's just an observation. I think that the point is, at the end of the day, everybody wants to go to the same place. I know that Mike Arcuri and President Obama and Nancy Pelosi want everybody to have health care and a good job and a roof over their head and have a comfortable society where everybody can take care of themselves and nobody's on any kind of program. I want that too. The difference is, how do we get there? I know what's energized this economy for 200 plus years is the private sector, where I've lived and made my good fortune and built my life. I know that in 200 plus years, our economy has provided more people with the highest standard of living than any other country in history. We're undoing that because we're taxing ourselves to death. We are killing the goose in this country. My objection's not Obama. Philosophically, I understand him. It's a matter of direction and approach, that's all. You have never heard me, and I defy you to find it on tape, Michael. I feel like you're doing a documentary of my life sometimes.
It may have been the 527s. You may be right about that. I've heard so many of them. But you are pretty well allied, with the 527s in terms of your philosophies on different issues, whether it's free trade or whether it's not reforming Wall Street. But it's my time, if I may proceed. Mm-hmm. The thing about what you say, it sounds very good, and you're right. We do need to reach across the aisle, but you don't give any specifics on how you would go about doing it. You need to do more than just talk the talk. There needs to be real effort. There needs to be real attempts. Suggested legislation that maybe you would agree to, that maybe a Democrat had signed on to, legislation that you might propose that you think you could work with both sides of the aisle. Those are the real substantive ways that you reach across the aisle. It's great to talk about it. We all want to do that. It's another thing to make it happen, and I think that's one of the things that I have done. I've made it happen.
Okay, your time's expired, sir. No more on this question. Time's out. Next question. Sorry. Hate to be the bearer of bad news. Mr. Arcuri.
I have to get the job first, Mike.
Okay,
but you're not even talking about it.
Moving along, sir.